Okay, so today we're going to run through mobile apps. Should you develop a native app or maybe a web app instead? Let's get into it. There's a few pros and cons we'll run through. Obviously, native apps give a lot more seamless user experience and interaction, and people love them. But of course, you've got to get people to download them, and then you've also got to maintain them on Android App Store as well as Apple App Store. So there's some considerations at a glance, and we'll get into each one of them in a bit more detail. So in front of me, I've got an app that we developed, which is I Promise app for Tradies Club down in Sutherland. Now, the purpose of this app was to track and incentivize people to do environmentally friendly activities. So the app was a native app for iPhone, and it did suit native app experience because it was meant to track people's activities, so things that they were doing regularly, and the interface was gamified to motivate them. So it needed to have a lot of interaction with the user and use a lot of features of the phone. So if you're planning to use a lot of the phone's inbuilt hardware, so things like accelerometer, gyroscope, all these different things, maybe health app, data, then it makes sense to make a native app. Of course, then there's the expectation that both app stores will have an app for Android as well as Apple. Then, of course, there's the maintenance costs, so that's an aspect to consider if you really need a native app. So in a lot of cases, we recommend to go for a web app, particularly as a phase one approach before going into native apps. So the advantage of that is that you can deploy an app more quickly and on a tighter budget. So get that app up and running, and users can access it without having to download. So you're more quickly to build up a user base as a web app. They can use it typically they can use it on a desktop, tablet or phone device without having to deploy to app stores, which really lowers the maintenance cost because we don't have to update for iOS updates every year, for example, can be costly to update and maintain. So that's an aspect to consider. So this is another app we developed as a native app, which was a inspection checklist app for electrical contracting. Now that also made sense to do as a native iPad app. One of the main reasons was a really heavy reliance on offline data. So web apps can do offline data, but in this case it was more reliable to use a native app with offline data storage. And then another one, which is an example of a web app, was for a gym franchise. They ran personal training in Anytime Fitness gyms. So the advantage of having a web app for them was that different users could access it without having to download an app. So people being trained could make payments quite easily, and then trainers could log their data on their training sessions without having to use an app and download an app and encounter those maintenance costs. So this one was a bit more administrative, so it doesn't really need the advanced features of a mobile phone, all the data that a phone can collect. It was more administrative based on the sessions. So hopefully that gives some context and understanding of the pros and cons, and also the advantages of, say, doing a web app as a phase one, and then potentially down the track, if users are enjoying that and there's more motivation or more budget to build native apps, then to build those as an extension of something that's already been tested. So I hope that helps with your plans for developing an app. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch, and thanks for listening.